Hello everyone, welcome back to Fundamentals of Python Bootcamp. My name is Aman Saini and I'll be your instructor throughout the course. This is lecture number 16 and today we are going to learn about lambda functions and revise loops in Python. So let's start with revising loops in Python. So there are two loops in Python, for loop and while loops. So let's start with for loop. So as we discussed earlier as well, so for loop is basically a loop that acts as an iterator in Python. It goes through items that are in sequence or any other iterable object. Objects that have learned about that we can iterate over, including strings, lists, tuples, and even built-in iterable dictionaries as well. So we have already seen for loop at a little bit in the past lectures, but now let's understand it with some pseudocode and examples. So for loop is designed using the for key, then item in some iterable object, then colon, and then the indentation, then whatever the steps or the statements we want to apply on the item. Okay, so let's hop on to the example directly. So we have a list, and this list is from 1 to 10. So let's check the type of L. It is a list, and then if we want to iterate over the elements of list one by one and then printing it, we can just do using a for loop. So here in example we are using for num in list. So every item will be passed on to this variable num and then we are printing it. So 1 up to the 10 we are getting the output. Great, hopefully this makes sense to you, and let's try to do something else. So here is an operation we call as modulus, and this is just to check the remainder of two numbers. So 17 modulus 5 will be 2, and 2 is the remainder actually if we divide 17 by 5. uh, so similar example. So let's say if we want to check which all numbers in a list is even number. So if we want to pull out those things, we can just apply some conditions inside a for loop. So here we are doing for num in L, every element in this L, we are applying and checking if number modulus 2 equals to 0, which means if number is a even number, then we want to print it. Otherwise just skip it. We don't want to do anything with those numbers. So in this loop we are doing and filtering out all of the even numbers. Okay. Second thing is in this we can apply else statement as well, including if and then else. And here what we are doing, we are just checking the even numbers, and if it is an even number then print the number, and else if it is an odd number just print odd number, not the exact value. So this also makes sense. Okay, let's say if we want to add up all of the elements of a list one by one using a for loop, so we can create a new variable list underscore sum which is 0 initially, and then every number in L we can just pull out and use it. So list sum equals to list sum plus number. So every number will be added up to this variable, and in the end we will have the total sum of the whole list. Okay, so we can apply for loop on the strings as well, because strings are also kind of an iterator, so we can do that. So every letter of the string will be passed on to this letter uh, variable, and then we can use it. Okay. We can use for loop on the tuple objects as well. So every element of tuple will be passed into this t variable, and then we can use it in the similar way. In this case we are just printing it. Okay, if we want to unpack multiple values in a for loop, so let's say we have a list and we have tuples of size 2 at every index. We can just define L, and then we can use for loop tuple and list. So every tuple will be saved into this single variable, and if we print it we will get one single value as a whole tuple. Okay, let's check the type of every element we are getting. So it says, okay, we have to print it. So it says we are getting tuple 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 3 times. Makes sense. So let's unpack it. So we can directly unpack the multiple values inside a for loop. So here what we are doing, we are defining that we will be receiving a tuple and we want to store the value number 1 to t1 and value number 2 of the tuple into t2, and then let's just print it. So we are getting two different values one by one. Let's try to check the value, the type. We are going to print type of t1. So we are getting actually integers, which is the actual value. So that's how we can unpack values directly inside a for loop, and it's very good property we can use. We can use dictionaries as well. We can directly pull out all the keys inside the element and then we can use it, the keys. Python 2 and Python 3 has different functions. So Python 2 has a function called iter items, which is just to get uh, the values in the key value pair in this format, key value pairs in the tuple format. And in Python 3 we have dot items function to get the tuple values, key value pairs basically. So that's how we can do it in Python 3. Let's define it first and then we can use it. So make sense. Here's also a resource that you can just go and understand more properties of for loop. Let's go and understand while loops. So while loops is very generic form of loop in any language, in similar case in Python as well. So while loop is just like while statement. If the condition is true, then we have to execute the statement. Otherwise, the last case will be this statement. This statement will be the final code statement if this particular condition fails. So that's how while loop are defined in Python. Just use while key and the column and then just make sure about the indentation levels. So in this case we have x equals to 0 and till when x is less than 10 we have to print the current value and then increment x plus 1. So that's how we can just printing out 10 different values. Okay, so next thing is break, continue and pass. So inside while loop we have different statement. We can break any key, any iteration in between the while loop. We can continue any iteration in between the while loop and we can pass on as well. So let's understand what these keywords means. So break means break out the current closes and closing loop. So which means if particular statement is gets true, and if it goes to one particular block inside a while loop, we just want to break the whole loop. Continue means if particular condition satisfied when the statement is execute, what we have to do is just go next iteration. Skip rest of the statements in the while loop after the continue and then just go to the next statement, next iteration of the loop. Pass means does do nothing. It's just basically for making syntax true. Okay, this is how a while loop looks like with statement. So while loop test, this is the condition. Code statement, whatever we want to do it. If particular test case 1 applies, then we want to break, and if some test case applies, then we want to continue. So let's understand it with the example. So here what we are doing, x equals to 0 while x is less than 10, and we are incrementing x value every time. Okay, so if condition x is less than equals to 3, we want to continue, which means after this continue, these all statement we don't want to execute it. Just go to the next statement, next iteration of the while loop. So ideally, which means if x equals to 0 initially, x equals to 1, now the x value is 1, which makes this statement true and it goes to continue, it goes up again. It won't execute the statement. So now x value equals to 2. It goes again. The statement is also true. It goes back again. Then now x value is equals to 3, which makes the statement again true, and then this continue executes, then it goes back to the while loop, and now x value is equal to 4. Then this statement is false, then it goes to the else statement, it prints x, and we are just saying outside else. Let's try to execute it. This is basically a dry run, and now let's just execute it directly. So we are getting the same results that we are expecting in our dry run. Okay, it makes sense, right? So similar again example, just using break and continue. So break, what it does, when x equals to 3, we want to stop the whole iteration, whole loop. So initially it is 0, it goes to 1, it prints the value, then it goes to 2, it prints the value, then it goes to 3. When this x equals to 3, then it goes breaking because x equals to 3, and then it goes break. So next iteration will be skipped, nothing will execute after this. So that's how break works. Okay. Don't try to do these infinite loops. Don't define your uh, like loops like this statement, which never changes. So make sure of these things. Okay, now let's jump to the main thing of this lecture, which is lambda expression. So one of Python most useful tool is lambda expression. For beginners, it is little bit confusing how and what are exactly lambda expressions. So let's try to understand and just focus on what it is exactly. You can put up any questions in the forum regarding lambda expressions. Uh, okay, so lambda expressions also used to create anonymous functions. Anonymous functions are basically those functions which doesn't have any name. This basically means we can quickly make ad hoc functions without needing the property to define the function using def keyword or define the name of the function. So function object returns by running lambda expressions works exactly the same as those were created in the UDF functions, like using keyword def. This is a key difference that makes lambda useful in specialized rules. Let's say uh, so lambda's body is a single expression, not a block statement, which means only one statement. If we want to define any function which has only one statement, we can use lambda expressions without hesitation, without thinking anything. The lambda's body is similar to what we use to put in def body's return statement in usual. For example, the first example we have used in the functions that we are going to define number 1 plus number 2, and we are just returning it directly. So in that case we can use lambda expressions. We don't want to define the whole function specifically using def keyword. So we can only squeeze design to limit program nesting. Lambda is designed for coding simple functions. Def handles the larger tasks. So it basically optimizes how the def how the functions are defined inside the compiler. It saves a lot of time for the developer as well. It creates very clean code, and it's very good uh, practice to use lambda functions if only one statement is going to be defined in the function. So let's say we have an example of square. If we want a square of any number, here what we are doing, we are just getting num as a parameter, we are saving it to result as a variable, and then we are returning the value. So if we want to call this function, we just call and then pass the value of the number, and we are getting the square of the number as a return statement as a result. Okay, let's break it down again. So now we don't define, now we are not defining any variable, we are just returning the value directly. Again, two statements are needed to define the whole function. It works same exactly like we defined here. Now let's do it more in pro way, how we can define the whole function. uh, so def square colon, and then we are just defining the return statement. No indentation, nothing is needed. We are defining the same function the same way. So it also works like this. Cool. But still, we have to write def, we have to write the function name, we have to pass the value, and then return, and then the exact operation. So seems like uh, this thing is not needed, this thing is not needed. It's just to make the syntax applicable, so we can remove it. So that's how lambda function is defined. Instead of def, just type lambda, pass your parameter and your return statement directly. So here we are like not using return and the function name. So that's how we can create a lambda function. That's how we can create an anonymous function, the function that doesn't have any name. So now it returns us a function as a pointer. Okay, how we can use it? So we can assign this object to any variable. Let's say we are assigning this whole object to square variable, and again, if we want to call this function, we can use it directly like the exact same way that we use it when we define any function using def keyword. Same square parenthesis and pass the value of the parameters, and we are getting the results as an output. Sounds cool, interesting. Okay. Uh, Maybe you guys have some question that I was calling it as an anonymous function, but I'm using a variable to give it a name. Why do we need it? So, good question if you're having this question in your mind. I'll explain it in the next few minutes. Okay, let's define another lambda function. This is basically a function which checks whether a number is even number or not. So even equals to lambda x modulus 2 equals to 0. This particular statement which is highlighted, it returns generally boolean value, and that's expected. So even will be returning us some boolean values. If we pass 3, it says false, which means it is not an even number. If we pass 4, we are getting true, which means it is a even number. Okay, let's define a function that returns the first character of any string. So we are passing s as a variable, and we are accessing 0th index of the string, and it returns the value. So hello we are passing, and we're getting h as the first value of the string. Okay, let's try to pass on some numbers. That's 777. So it throws an error, which means int object is not subscriptable, which means we can't do slicing or we can't do indexing on this integer number. So make sure whatever you are passing into this lambda function should be meaningful. So we can pass any string. Okay, we can pass list as well. Let's say 1 comma 2 comma 3, and we are getting the first index. So which means lists are also subscriptable. So it makes sense. That's what we have defined in this lambda function. That's what it is expected. Okay, let's try to define a function which is to return the string. So if you guys remember string slicing, so this is a slicing, and we are just doing a very simple operation, which means we want to start string with this location, we want to end the string at this location, and the step side should be -1, which means we want to step back every time, and basically it means reversing a string. Okay, so reverse, and let's our ev call and pass the string, and we are getting reverse string. Let's pass some list object 1 comma 2 comma 3 comma 4, and we are getting the list in reverse format. So it works both ways, on the string and the list. Whatever object is iterable, we can do it on this thing. Okay, this is the same first example we were using. It's adding two numbers, so adder equals to 2 comma 3. We can pass two different variables as well. Like this, we are passing only one parameter, we can pass two parameters as well, and we can perform any operation on top of it as well. So adder, it will expect two parameters because we are defining x comma y, two variables, two attributes, two parameters. So do it the same way. So lambda expressions are very good thing if we use constructions like map and filter and reduce and many more functions. So understand lambda functions. They are very simple to define, and they are very good way of defining any function. Here is an article as well. You can just go in ahead and understand lambda functions with more examples. Okay, let's jump to the map. So map is a function that takes two argument, a function and a sequence which is iterable in the form like map, function and the sequence. Which means if we want to map this function on every item of the sequence, we can use map. So the first argument in the name of the function, and the second is a sequence. Map applies the function to all the elements of the sequence. It returns a new list with the element changed by the function. Which means if we have an iterable object, let's say it has 4 elements, and we want to perform some operation on every element, we will getting the same size of the output. Okay, let's do it and check it with some examples. So def Fahrenheit return, and this is basically a function. This is basically an operation to convert any Celsius to Fahrenheit, and this function is to convert any Fahrenheit temperature to Celsius format. So these are the temperatures 0, 22.5, 40, 100, and let's say we can use it in both ways. So let's assume temp for now temperatures are in Celsius. So these values are in Celsius and we want to convert it into Fahrenheit. So we can just do map our function and the iterable object. So these temp is are the temperatures in Celsius format, and these are the output that we are getting. So then in the end we are just printing it. So now we have a map object. So it is returning as a map object, which means it has some values, and it has values that are related to that Fahrenheit is applied to every element of this object. And if you want to get the value, just do, we can convert it into list as well. So list, now we are getting the list as an output. So we are typecasting this map object to a list object. So we are getting 0 to 32, that means 0 degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit. Converting back Celsius, so now we have Celsius values and we want to convert the Celsius value back to Fahrenheit. Oh, sorry, these are some Fahrenheit values and we want to convert it back to Celsius. This is this function, and f underscore temps. Let's convert it back. So expected result will be, it is returning us some map object. So we get the map object. Let's convert back into some object. Let's say list. So now we have a list which is empty. Okay, why so? Celsius, is it defined? Okay, we are getting value. I'll check why it is not working. Okay, you guys can also check. It's kind of homework for you. It's kind of a challenge for you. But if not, I'll post out this output. Why it is not showing us the value. Okay, maybe it is updated in Python 3.9. Okay, how we can use it? Lambda functions and map. So map is expecting any function object as a first argument. So we can directly define the whole function using lambda function inside the parameter. So here what we are doing, we are not defining any function prior, we are defining the whole function inside the parameter itself. So lambda x, and we want to convert this x into some values which are in Celsius. So we are passing f temps which are Fahrenheit values, and then we are just converting it back. Okay, great. We got the same results using map and so and so forth. Okay. Okay, I think I got why it is not producing the value. So it is returning as a list, and originally f underscore temp has the map object, and map object expects some iterable object, not a map object here. So what we are doing here, we are passing here a map object, not a list. So if you want to make it workable, which is returning as empty list, what we have to do is we need to update f underscore temp back to a list. So now f underscore temp is a list object. uh, I'll show you the type now. It is a list, and now if we do it we will get the results. Okay, makes sense. Alright, so we can, okay, map can be applied to more than one iterable objects. The iterable objects have to have the same length for every element we are passing. For instance, if we are working on two lists, list map will apply its lambda function to the element of the argument lists. That is the first element of the element with 0th index, the element with the first index until the nth index is reached. For example, we have three lists A, B, C. These has four elements in every list, and we are applying map which is x comma y is x plus y, and we are passing two lists. So it will basically, what it does, it adds up A, B values. So 1 plus 5, 2 plus 6, 3 plus 7, 4 plus 8. Make sense? Let's convert it to list. 6, 8, 10, 12. Now we can pass 3 as well. Lambda can expect as much as value we can pass, and that's the same length that we have to pass in into the map. Make sure ABC has the same length list. So now we have the values. So 1 plus 5 plus 9, that is 15, 2 plus 6 plus 10 is 18, and so on and so forth. So we can see the examples above with the parameter x and all ABC, that's explanation. So great job, now we have basic understanding of how map function works. So I guess all the topics of this lecture are covered. If you guys have any question, you can pass on your queries to the forum and I'll try to give you answers. Thank you so much, guys.